In this video, I'll be providing you with 5 tips for Pick 2 Draft so you can find more success in your next event. First, Pick 2 Draft is a format where 4 players open 3 packs each and draft cards 2 picks at a time. They then use these cards and basic lands to build 40 card decks. So the main difference between Pick 2 Draft and a conventional draft is that there are half as many players, so 4 players instead of 8, and that in each pack that you open and get past, you are taking 2 cards at a time out of that pack instead of 1 card at a time. So the first tip is strategize your first pack. And there are 2 main approaches with this first pack. That is the best 2 approach and the best plus synergy approach. So in the best 2 approach, you just take the objectively strongest best 2 cards out of the pack, regardless of their color, regardless of whether they fit into the same deck. You just leave yourself with the maximum power level after the first pack. The best plus synergy approach is where you find the best card in the pack and then you take a card that works well with it. Often that will mean a card that is the same color, or maybe a card that fits into the same archetype. So if the best card is a blue-green card or something like that, then maybe the synergy card would be a green card that fits into the same archetype that blue-green is going for in that set. So as an example of when you might want to use best 2 approach, if the best card in the pack is something like Banishing Light, which is just a solid common removal spell, that's often a better time to use the best 2 approach because you're not super connected to the Banishing Light. If you don't end up playing it, you're not going to be that unhappy, but it's a card that's going to be strong in your deck. It's just not a crazy card that really wants you to build around it and try to force into that archetype. However, if you open a card like Glorybringer, which is a super powerful dragon that can be your best card in your deck, oftentimes it's better to use the best plus synergy approach, taking another red card to go with that Glorybringer so you can maximize your odds of getting to play that Glorybringer. So those are just the general approach, because getting to take 2 cards out of a pack can be a quite significant advantage as long as you're strategizing around it. The next tip, reading signals, is critical. In Pick 4 Draft especially, because finding the open lane is going to lead to huge rewards. So if your table is going to look something like this at the end of the draft, where maybe one player is playing white-black, one player is playing blue-green, one player is playing green-white, and one player is playing red-blue, that's just a general distribution of the colors, and each player is not really overlapping too much with their neighbor, maybe just a little bit, because that's going to be inevitable to some degree. If you can end up being the white-black player or red-blue player in this scenario, you end up with all of the black cards at the table or all of the blue cards at the table. Now, not every single one, because players will take a couple speculatively, but you're going to get a very powerful deck because you get all of the benefits of no one else trying to overlap with your colors. And in a Pick 4 draft, this is going to happen because there's just only so many colors each player is going to play, whereas in an 8-player draft, it's much less likely to happen because there's twice as many players. People are going to fight over the colors a little bit more, and you're going to have contested colors. So finding the open lane can get you a huge reward in Pick 2 Draft. Now, finding the color no one else is drafting is a huge advantage. That is the ideal outcome. And to do that, you're going to want to read the signals. Now, reading signals is a complicated process, but here are some general tips. The first thing you want to do is have an open mind. Don't go into the draft thinking, oh, I'm only going to draft blue-red, or oh, I'm only going to draft blue. Because as you saw, if other players go into the draft with that same mindset and everyone's drafting blue, you're not going to get the benefit of having an open color where you can get a lot of the cards of that color passed to you a little bit later. The second thing you want to do is identify strong cards. So that's something you already want to be doing because you're trying to take the strong cards. But even the cards that you aren't taking, you want to keep an eye on them. Like, oh, I didn't take these green cards with my picks, but I've been seeing good green cards. And so if you keep seeing good green cards in a couple of packs in a row, then you can maybe think, okay, maybe green's open and I should start drafting green, even if I haven't taken the green cards yet. Obviously, if you've already taken those cards, you can identify, okay, the best card in the last pack was red and I took it. The best cards in this pack are red and I'm taking those cards. And so you can start to find signals that way. So just keep an open mind, first of all. Second, identify strong cards. Third, look for trends. So if you keep seeing green cards, green is often going to be open in that scenario. You don't want to use one pick as a isolated event as the, oh, this color must be open. Like you see a green card that you really like and you're like, oh, green must be open because I've seen this one particular card. You want to look for a trend where you're seeing green cards over time so that one particular card evaluation that maybe you like a card more than everybody else doesn't influence you and force you into a color that that player next to you is actually drafting. Fourth, remain flexible. So just because you've taken a couple of cards early, maybe your first pack, you took a really strong card that's red and you went for the strong card plus synergy approach, and so you have 2 red cards in your pack, in your pool, and the next pack there's not really any good red cards, you don't want to just stick to red just because your first couple of picks were red. Even though you'd like to draft red in a lot of those scenarios, maybe you just have to move off of the color and be willing to draft blue-white in your particular seat, and you'll get stronger cards passed to you later that will make up for the fact that you have to abandon your first picks. Staying flexible is absolutely key. And then finally, pay attention to what wheels. Now in draft, wheeling means the cards that come back to you from the same pack. So when you open your pack in Pick 2 Draft, you're going to take 2 cards out of it, pass it to the person next to you. They're going to take 2 cards out of it, they're going to pass it, 2 more cards get taken, they pass it, 2 more cards get taken, and then the pack comes back to you, and there's going to be 8 cards missing, 2 of which are the ones you took, but you can then look at the rest of the pack and be like, okay, there's 6 cards left in this pack, because there's going to be 14 cards in a play booster these days. There's going to be 6 cards left, you can be like, okay, most of the good cards are gone, because the players have kind of taken all of the good cards out of this pack, but what's left? Is there like a card that is solid? Is there a card that I was expecting to be taken, but wasn't taken? Is there, like, and what color is that card? So if you kind of pay attention to what's coming back from the packs you've already seen, you can get a good idea of what the other players are doing if you pay attention and really look for those signals. The next tip is expect lower synergy. Now, that is going to be primarily a function of cards opened. With 4 players, there are half as many cards opened, so synergy pieces you can draft late are opened less. One of the key elements to a synergy deck in draft is that you care about cards that other players don't care about. So imagine you're building a deck around a +1/+1 counter theme. If you are the only player doing that, you can get cards for your deck incredibly late that other players can't use that you are very happy to have. In an 8-player draft, there's twice as many cards opened, so even if there's more players potentially able to take the cards from you, they don't care about those cards, and so the cards can get around the table and end up in your deck, and you're going to be happy to play them. In a 4-player draft, even if the other players don't care about the same cards as you, they just simply might not open the cards that you care about, and because there's just a smaller card pool, there's more variance in the particular synergy pieces that get opened, and so the synergy pieces you care about might not get opened. So even if you are in an open lane, you just might not get the cards that you care about because those cards just aren't opened in the packs. As a way of thinking about this that maybe clarifies this concept, if you imagine you open 3 packs and you try to build a deck by yourself with those 3 packs, that deck's going to be kind of hard to build because you might not have the cards in the right colors and things like that. If a second player also opens 3 packs and then you can trade cards back and forth, both of your decks are going to get much better because you care about cards that they don't care about, they care about cards that you don't care about. And that kind of just keeps extending as you add more players to this theoretical trading pool. And because draft is essentially all players kind of doing this where they build decks kind of together at the same time, the more players that are involved in this, the higher power level of the decks. And so that's just a way of thinking about this that kind of maybe clarifies this concept for you. But basically, decks are going to be scrappier and a little bit lower synergy. And as a result of this, you want to focus on cards that are powerful on their own and strategies with lots of redundancy. So if you are going to build a synergy deck, you want to make sure that it's not, oh, I have to get this very specific card for this strategy to work. If I don't get this one build around uncommon, my whole strategy falls apart, because it's much less likely that card is going to be opened and then available to you just because there's less cards available in the pool. Whereas if it's a strategy that's widely supported, relatively straightforward, maybe there's just tons of token enablers in the set, and so you can just relatively consistently build a token strategy, things like that. You can focus on cards that are in strategies with lots of redundancy and cards that are powerful on their own, that are just like strong on-rate cards, get you some value, do good things, that type of thing. Those strategies are going to be better in Pick 2 Draft where there is less synergy. Another way you can think about this concept is if you've played Sealed deck, Sealed as a format is lower synergy than Draft because you aren't able to trade cards with what your opponents are, like you aren't able to basically collaboratively draft with other players. And it's similarly going to be lower synergy in Sealed. Pick 2 Draft is kind of like a hybrid between Draft and Sealed, where you're still drafting, but there's less cards available, so there's lower synergy as a result. Next tip is hate drafting gets a bit better. Now, this tip is based on the fact that if you're playing in person, you're playing in pod, you're playing against the people you are drafting with. If you're playing in an online environment where you're not actually directly competing against the people you are passing with, hate drafting is irrelevant. But if you are playing in person with other players that you are then going to play against, hate drafting gets better because it's just math. You are going to generally, as a recommendation, play 2 matches in a Pick 4 draft. You play against your first round opponent, and then the 2 players that are 1-0 play each other, and the 2 players that are 0-1 play each other. And so playing 2 of the 3 players in your pod means that you are much more likely to face a card than when you play only 3 of the 7. So in an 8-player person draft, you play 3 rounds against 3 of the other 7 people in your pod. So you're just much more likely to face a particular card in a pick 2 draft than if you're playing a conventional draft, because with half as many players, you're going to be playing 2 of the 3 opponents instead of 3 out of 7. So that's just a much higher percentage. So if there is a card that you just don't think you can beat, or there's just nothing good for you in the pack, or there's just like a very mediocre card that's probably not going to make the cut for you, it's better to just oftentimes just take that card out of contention so you don't have to face it potentially from your opponents. But generally, it's still a recommendation. Don't go overboard. Always remember, you still need to build your own deck. Hate drafting is not going to increase the power level of your own deck, which is priority numero uno when you are drafting. Now, the final tip is remember it's still limited. Limited as a format is going to be different whether you're playing draft, sealed, or pick 2 draft, but it is still limited at the end of the day. Stay the course. Pick 2 draft is going to be limited. If you already have experience, you don't need to make sweeping changes. It's kind of like how if you're playing sealed, you'll make some slight adjustments to the way you build your deck, but you're not going to completely change the way that you approach the format. You're still going to focus on having a good curve. You're still going to want a good mix of creatures, removal, value. You're still going to want to try to maximize playing your bomb rares and things like that. You're not going to have to completely adapt the way you play the game just because it's pick 2 draft. There's just some optimizations you can make if you are trying to do the absolute best you can in the format. That's going to do it for this video, though. Thanks for watching. If you made it to the end, leave hashtag pick2player in the comments section down below. That's going to do it for this one, though. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.